Welcome to part 6 of my desktop Orrery series. In this video we'll be doing the Saturn gearbox layer. So this is the top Saturn plate and this is the bottom Saturn plate. What we need to do is make sure that when we drill the hole in here that I have it the right distance so that meshes perfectly. So the technique I use is I slide down this gear upside down. So it's been slid on there upside down. I previously marked approximately where the hole is with a marker. And then I'm putting the gear down on top of right where it needs to be. I'm going to take a 1/4-inch center punch to go through that hole. Now I don't want to squeeze this right up and tight against that gear or the gear can bind. So what I like to do is mark a spot and I rotate it to make sure I'm not binding anywhere. And I don't want it to be too loose either. So that looks like a pretty good distance right there. Now, in order for the top and the bottom to line up, what I do next, I'll take the Jupiter plate off. Now, how I get these to line up is these have all these holes in this have been cut at the same time, so that when I drill through both these, I get the hole in the exact same spot. And so that held in place with a couple of nuts. They're nice and flat, they're on there. I have my little mark there. Now we're going to take it over the mill. Using a center drill, I line up on the mark that I just made. That looks about right. You can see my little mark is there. So now these two holes are going to line up perfectly when we get done. So first I will put the Jupiter plate back on. That one's going to go there. This one's going to go here. Now we got to make the support shafts that go under here that will hold the Saturn plate in place, and then we got to make C and D gears. So I made an error when I did my drill to show you how I line everything up. Because the center punch had tilted off to the side a little bit, I should have been double checking that. What I ended up having to do though is I ended up drilling these holes out to a 1/4 inch so it would mount properly in the hole and line up. So I ended up with a 1/4 inch hole. I'll have a 1/4 inch shaft that goes through there and rides in that hole, and it'll be held in place between the set screw on the A gear and a set screw on the C gear. Here the C gear is being fabricated. Then a side shaft for gears A and C is made. A and C gears are then mounted to the side shaft. 2 support rods are then created for the Saturn plate. This is D gear being made and the completed D gear next to the Saturn shaft. Here, A, B, C, and D gears are mounted to the orrery without the Saturn plate in place. Finally, the Saturn plate is screwed into place. I've completed the gears for the Saturn layer now. So the gearbox is done for the Copernican orrery. At this point, I'm going to take the whole thing apart and stain and varnish that wood base. I'm also planning on putting a cover plate. If you remember, I made one extra plate in case I screwed one up. I'm going to use that to make a cover plate for this one that's only going to have the 2 holes for the screws, so that'll look very nice. I'm also going to clean up all the plates and polish the top plate. Well, I've completed that top plate. I made a little bit of an error. I was drilling a little recess into the plate so that this hub or this shaft here wouldn't rub against that top. And I accidentally, instead of just putting a little recess in there, put a hole all the way through. So I thought, hey, I need to initial and date this anyway. I always like the way the copper looks on top of brass. I made a little copper plate with my initial and the year on it. So I used a red oak stain to coat the entire surface of the oak base. I'm applying that here. Then 2 coats of a high gloss polyurethane varnish were applied to the surface of the stained oak. The base is varnished and stained, and all of the pieces of brass that I wanted to polish up are polished up. I shortened all of the planetary tubes so that I could compress the size of the orrery vertically. And now I'm going to reassemble. Reassembly took a little while. I ended up having to do this twice because I got it all together and then found one of the set screws was sticking out far enough to bind against the worm gear on the base of the drive. So I had to take the whole thing apart again and find a shorter set screw to put into that gear. Other than that, the whole thing came together pretty nicely. I think it took me about 35 or 40 minutes each time to reconstruct this thing after taking it apart. I'm coming to the end here, and the last thing I'm doing is applying the stand-in twists of wire that I use for the orrery test to stand in for what will be the planet rods that hold the actual planets in place. We have the orrery all back together. So polished and sanded and stained and varnished. The different wires Saturn is now on. So Saturn's the brown wire, purple wire is Jupiter, red for Mars, blue for Earth, green for Venus, and orange for Mercury. And we have our little sun. And you can see our wire up here for later when we start powering up the sun and making that light up when it's actually running. Let this run for a while and we'll put it in fast motion so you can see the movement of the stand-ins for the planet rods.